Hello, this is Jules. This video is a spiral dynamics take on the path of mastery. Basically, I alluded to this in a previous video, which I linked below, but I really wanted to dive into this in more detail and give it its own video. You can take any skill and see it as traversing along the spiral. Again, if this spiral is not familiar to you, then I recommend checking out the overview videos of spiral dynamics, which I will also link below. Anyway, in my lines of development video, I mentioned that lines of development as you're progressing your consciousness can include things like skills. This was an epiphany that I had a while ago that really blew my mind. I realized that every skill I had ever learned followed the same pattern. And that pattern happened to match really well with the spiral dynamics stages. So I'm going to describe this pattern to you in spiral dynamics terms. And there are several amazing, like really profound ideas that can come out of this that I will describe as I go. So any skill starts out, a person starts out being just unaware that this skill even exists. So taking, for example, computer programming, a child who is playing a computer game probably isn't aware that this game was programmed by a person. That doesn't really enter into their heads. The next stage is that the person becomes aware that it's a skill, but it looks like magic. It looks like it's just happening, and you don't know why it's happening or how it works. For example, when I was a kid watching my great-grandmother crochet, it looked like she was doing weird magical gestures with her hands, and a scarf was just slowly appearing. I had no concept of how the gestures she was making with her hands caused the scarf to come into existence. This is also a stage where people are likely to have superstitions about how the skill works that aren't very accurate and aren't based on real evidence. The next stage is red stage, which is the brute force hacking stage. It's where this is the first stage where you're actually trying to do the skill yourself. And you don't realize how much work goes into it. And you think, well, I can just try this out. I don't need somebody to tell me how to do it. I can just do it. And you make lots of mistakes. And maybe you get some results. And maybe those results are good enough for you. Or maybe they're not. And that can cause you to go to the next stage, which is blue. So blue stage is where you realize, okay, this is more complicated than I thought. I am going to need some instructions, and you find some instructions or you find a teacher, and the tendency in blue stage is to follow these rules religiously. So now I'm going to pause here and note that a person can stay in any stage regarding a skill for the rest of their life. So I know that there are plenty of skills that I am still in beige about. There are plenty of skills that I don't even have any awareness of the existence of. And that will probably be the case for the rest of my life. In fact, I am probably completely unaware of most skills. And I think that's the case for everybody. And then there are some skills that I'm aware of that look like magic to me. I don't know how they happen, and I'm aware that because I've lived a lot of life at this point, so I have experienced enough skills going through these stages that I know that there's probably more to these skills than I see, but I'm still in purple stage regarding them. They still look magical to me, even though I know there's more going on behind the scenes. And then it's really easy to get stuck or stay in red stage in a skill because it's easy to say, well, my results are good enough. And there's nothing wrong with that. And this is dabbling, basically. You can dabble in lots of skills and get a taste for them. And your results are going to be pretty poor, but if that's all you need, then that's completely sufficient. And then there will be a few skills that you actually learn how to learn. You start following some rules in studying them, and then you'll get some slightly better results. Still probably fairly mediocre results, and they will be um, they won't surpass the results of whatever method you're using to teach yourself. So if you're following a YouTube video and you're following it exactly, you're probably going to get the same results as the person who made the YouTube video. You're not going to be innovating in Blue Stage. There is a tendency also to jump back and forth between stages. For example, Blue Stage back to Red Stage and then to Blue Stage. So you might be following, for example, a cooking recipe and then decide, well, I don't like ginger, so I'm going to replace it with garlic and see what happens. That's a red stage approach to that recipe, especially if it's the first time you're doing that recipe, because you're not yet at orange stage where you're analyzing everything you know about the ingredients. You're just sort of trying stuff out, brute force, and that's natural too. To follow some rules and then decide that you're going to do it your way for a little while, and then maybe those results don't work out so great, and you decide to go back to following the rules. Eventually, if you are following the rules and you decide that you want better results, that can bring you into orange stage. And sometimes that transition happens naturally where you're following the rules and you just start to see things, you start to notice things, and that can kick you into orange stage regarding the skill, where you start to analyze how it really works. You start to see patterns in the instructions that you've been following, and you see how there's a why behind everything. For example, when I was learning crochet, I discovered, as I was following the rules, I discovered that the stitches that I was learning, single stitch, double stitch, treble stitch, all had the same basic components, and I could kind of guess what the next more complex stitch might be. That was an orange stage of that skill. Someone in orange stage regarding a skill is becoming an expert. And most people see orange stage as being the top of a skill. You are now an expert, you are now a master, and you're done. But there is a lot more that you can discover in any skill. If you end up going into green stage regarding a skill, at this point, in my experience, you no longer really need to think about doing the skill. It's becoming very automatic, and you begin to experience uh, slightly spiritual effects, and you start to notice how it affects you holistically. So, using the crochet example, when I started getting into green stage in crochet, I noticed that crochet was actually acting as a type of therapy for me. It was therapeutic. I found myself feeling a lot less stressed when I was crocheting. That was not the case when I was back in blue. When I was learning how to crochet, I found it somewhat stressful because I was making mistakes and trying to follow rules, and sometimes not understanding why I was following the rules. And in orange stage, when I was analyzing how it worked, I still wouldn't call it relaxing or stress relieving. I would have called it exciting because I was discovering new things about it. But when I got into green stage, it became therapeutic. And I would say that's early green stage. And then there's a later green stage where that holistic view moves from being about the self to being about the world. And the way that I experienced this with respect to crochet was I started to see how the yarn industry worked, and that there were these big gaps in the yarn industry in how it worked in the United States. And I ended up actually starting a business, what I called an ethical yarn business that provided yarn that was from fairly traded sources, undyed yarn, yarn from sustainable fibers, things like that. So I started uh, basically seeing a green stage style cause, specifically with regard to this skill, crocheting. And I started taking action on uh, making the yarn industry more holistic. If um, if you get from green stage to yellow stage, this is a big jump. It is from tier 1 to tier 2. In order to do that, you have to experience a fair degree of mastery of at least a few other skills, because uh, in order to get to yellow, you need to be able to start seeing connections among disparate skills that are not necessarily related to each other, or at least not in obvious ways. The example that I have following the crochet example is that when I was starting to learn programming, I started to notice that programming was basically writing a set of instructions for the computer. And that felt very similar to the kinds of instructions that I've been following in following crochet patterns. So having mastered crochet up to this stage gave me a head start in mastering programming. And that's where mastery of mastery starts to become a thing. As you master multiple skills, you start to see the patterns of what mastery entails, and you become better at mastery itself. You get better at learning. So already this is unusual. Most people don't get this far in a skill. And now we're going to start talking about well beyond normal in a skill. And this is where I think it gets really exciting. When you get to turquoise stage, you start to feel this whole, you get these mystical experiences regarding the skill that you're working on, where it's like you can feel or see the whole cosmos through your skill. You feel how it's not just a few things are connected to each other, everything is connected to each other. And there's this feeling of, oh, I understand the universe, which is it is incredibly profound, and it's an amazing experience. I'm laughing because it feels like the end, like it can't get any more profound than that, but there's still more to come. Also, this can be where you start to genuinely have mystical abilities regarding your skill, if you haven't already. And then the next stage is coral. Coral stage feels very mundane compared with the mystical experiences of turquoise stage, or at least it does to me, or it has to me in the past. Coral stage in a skill is a stepping back. Now that you've seen the truth, what feels like the ultimate truth through your skill, there's this sense of wanting to go back to basics and to clean up, because you see how much you're missing. It's like in yellow stage, you feel like you know it all. In turquoise stage, you feel like you're experiencing it all. In coral stage, you see how much you are not experiencing, or how much is missing. And I experienced this in with regards to crochet as wanting to learn skills around crochet, like the spinning process, the dyeing process, how to shear a sheep, things like that. There's also a sense of wanting to, or there could be also a sense of wanting to clean up your life in order to facilitate further mastery of your skill. So this could cause you to completely change your lifestyle, cleaning up your diet, your environment, your schedule, anything and everything. Teal stage is where it's like a another step up from the turquoise mystical experiences, where you start to get genuine visionary insights regarding your field. So this might be inexplicable uh, divine downloads about what is happening or what is going to happen in the future of your field. It could be really out there innovations. This is when I talk about visionary insights, I'm talking about something in teal stage. I'm talking about something that is well beyond the kinds of innovations that one would get in orange stage. Innovations in orange stage are the kinds of innovations that where you look at it and you're like, yeah, that makes sense. The kinds of visionary insights that you get in teal often don't make sense. They are so far out there that they just don't make sense with the left brain. But if you follow them, they can have really magical results and actually genuinely move the field forward in leaps and bounds. Plum stage is it. I would say it's kind of a step up from coral stage in that it is this experience of clarity about your skill and your field, where you see that less is more. And this can actually cause you to do a lot less, where you get very zen about it, where you start to see that there's not much to do, and you end up doing very, very little. But what you do is the things that you do end up doing, even though they're very small, they have huge impact, because you have the background of these Teal visionary insights. You now have this surgical precision with which you do things. So most of the time you don't act, but when you do act, it is very powerful. And then in Aubergine, this is where if you've seen the lines of development video, this is the lines converge at the end. In Aubergine, you are really experiencing how everything is one thing, and that is consciousness, and how the point of everything is to serve capital C consciousness or divinity. So with regards to a specific skill in Aubergine, your motivation has shifted dramatically, to the point where the only reason to practice your skill anymore is to directly serve capital C consciousness or divinity. So this, what I'm hoping to demonstrate with this entire video, is that any skill, it doesn't matter how mundane it is, any skill, if you take it far enough, can basically take you to enlightenment, or what people call enlightenment. It's in tier 2, you need to start progressing other skills as well. So if you've only been progressing one skill all the way through green, you're going to have I would say it's impossible to jump from green to yellow if you've only been focusing on mastering one skill. You'll need to master at least one other in order to jump from green to yellow. And as you progress in tier 2, even in one skill, you'll notice that you have to catch up the other aspects of yourself in order to keep on progressing that skill. So the further you go, the more holistic your approach becomes toward that skill, to the point where in just trying to progress one skill as far as you can take it, you will end up dragging the rest of yourself along, the rest of the areas of your life along, because you have to, in order to support your progress with that particular skill. And this is an incredibly profound concept, that any skill can take you all the way to enlightenment. So, and I really mean this, I mean any skill, like chopping wood could take you all the way to enlightenment if you really decided to hone that skill all the way. Running could take you to enlightenment if you really wanted to hone that skill all the way. It needs to be, in order to take you that far, it needs to be something that you're very passionate about, because it's a lot of hard work and it requires a lot of motivation. You have to really stick with it and really put in the hours in order to get that far. But if there is something that you find that you're very passionate about, this is a compelling reason to really dive into it. So I hope this video was insightful for you and expanded your concept of what consciousness development can look like. And I look forward to doing other videos on spiral dynamics and learning in general. And I hope to see you again.